What's up there, Workforce? Chris here with Work To Game, and this is the third and final video on the beginner's guide to how to pick your class. Maybe you've already picked your first class and you're just wondering if you did it the best way possible. Maybe you're new to the game from another game, or maybe this is your very first adventure into an MMO, but it's a three-part series that we started with kind of what are even the roles, then second of all, how do those roles break down within the classes that we actually have here in-game, knowing that each class has its own specializations and will probably need its own class video to really dive into each class because that video was already horribly long. And this last one is knowing, well, what are you using these classes for? That way you know, okay, well, I know kind of what tanks are and kind of what healers are, and I know which classes do those things, but how does the game actually play? So let's dive in. Now, the first type of content is open world content. You're going to spend the vast majority of your time leveling out in the world, doing world quests in the world, all of that over the course of the beginning of you playing this game, and maybe even long-term playing this game. There is a huge amount of content to enjoy out in the world, single player, in small groups, picking up with strangers, killing world bosses and rare mobs and all of that. And so knowing kind of how these classes play out in the open world, keep in mind that damage dealers are going to move decently fast, and the one thing they're going to have to worry about is can they survive things attacking them. BFA has been pretty forgiving with that. Tanks are maybe a little slower on the DPS, but typically, like as I run my Guardian Druid out in the world, I can pull huge amounts of mobs at once. My life doesn't really drop unless I get attacked by another player, because I do play with what's called War Mode on. That's your open world PvP where I can be attacked by players of the opposing faction. You opt in and out of that, so if that doesn't sound like something for you, just know that that's a choice. There are rewards for taking that risk, but it is totally avoidable if you don't want to do that. The second type of content is dungeons. This is really kind of where the rubber hits the road with the class roles, those tanks, healers, and DPS. You know, and you could play open world with one specialization and pick a totally different specialization or spec for the dungeon content. Most dungeon content is going to center around 5 mans. As you get into endgame, there's what's called M+, where you can actually scale up the dungeon to make it even harder, making how well you play your role incredibly important as you approach higher difficulties. And then, of course, we move into our larger content, our raid content. There are several tiers of raid content, beginning with what's called LFR, looking for raid, and then moving into normal, heroic, and mythic. And as you move up that tier, how well you play your class is going to become more and more and more important. Down at the LFR, honestly, one of the more important things is the wait time. So if you're willing to tank in LFR, if you're willing to heal in LFR, you are going to get in there faster, typically, than a DPS. So the last type of content that I'd like to touch on is PvP. PvP has a ton of different modes in this game. So really, just depending on what kind of PvP you like, they've done a great job in BFA, in my opinion, of starting to move things to where they just take like the same kind of token. So if you have something like a piece of gear you want to buy, it seems like they're moving in the direction where if you just do PvP in general, whatever type you like, that you'll get your reward instead of having to go do anything specific. But there are a ton of specific achievements and all sorts of fun things tied to PvP. So if you're interested in that specifically player versus player, which is different than open world PvP where you're just attacking a guy because, specifically interested in PvP, battlegrounds, arena, things like that, then what class you pick may be something a little bit different there as well. So those are going to be kind of your 4 main types of content, really focused on open world, and then dungeons and raids, which are kind of the same, and then PvP. That's really where you're going to spend. That pretty much sums up the experience here. There are things that are not based on your class, things like pet battles and all of that. The game is very big, but when it comes to which class you picked, those are kind of the big core tenets of what you want to spend your time on. So you really need to sit down and think, well, how do I play these games? If you're between 2 classes, see if maybe, if the class trial doesn't decide it for you, maybe you know, hey, I like to go back and farm old content. Are any of these classes better at farming old content? Well, yes, classes with high mobility are typically really good at that because everything dies in one hit anyway. and you can clear a dungeon up to 10 times an hour with resets, and so there are plenty of classes out there that can clear a run in 6 minutes or less. There's no point in clearing it in less because you're still capped by the 10 per hour unless you're going to clear it just 10 times and move on to the next dungeon. And so maybe you're interested in the raid scene, in which case you're gonna have to kind of think about what the raid group you want to join is going to need. So either maybe you already know them, or B, you're just going to find something, in which case, in my opinion, the class doesn't really matter because you can just find a raid group that has an opening for the class you happen to play. But if you're playing with friends, what do they play? What are they missing? What do they need? And is that a class that interests you? Because if those things overlap, that's an obvious shoo-in. I play Druid. In the past, I've played a lot of damage dealing ranged, and I've played a lot of healing in the raid scene, and I am playing with some friends, and as I start to get into my M+ and raid content, what they need me to be is a ranged DPS or a tank. And so I've been playing a lot as a tank and trying to learn that and get up to speed so that I can step into that role when they need me for that. They actually have plenty of healers, and so I'm letting that spec kind of sit idle for me for BFA outside of when I'm just doing content outside of that group. And so you kind of have to decide when you're doing group content, well, what does the group need? Typically across the whole server, they need tanks and healers, but you might be in a group that already has that covered. Because since most groups start with those positions, a lot of times, you know, you have two friends that maybe one's a healer and one's a tank, and they've started a group and it's expanded from there. You're not going to replace either of them. So then we talk about kind of open world content, farming, things like that. That starts to actually, in my opinion, become more a conversation of, does your class determine your professions? So I wouldn't worry too much about that when you're just trying to create your first character, but starting to look into the professions and stuff in the game could help steer you in that direction. So these are just some general ideas how to take the previous video where we talked about what all these classes do and start to talk a little bit about, does the type of content that I'm most interested in make a difference in the type of content that I'm going to play, right? So like, you know, am I going to play warrior because I know I want a tank and then I know I want to hit people in the face with big weapons in PvP, right? Am I going to play priest because I know I want to heal and I've always liked ranged casting? You know, so like, just what is that fit for you? And just look at the kind of experience you want to have and pick your class accordingly. You can always go back and change. You can always go back and level another character. The key is, if possible, finish leveling your first character first, because once you have a character at cap, there are so many things in this game that you can do to make your secondary class level way faster. There are just a ton of advantages to having an already level capped character. So stick with it. You get level boost potions free with your purchase of game. So if you purchase the game and you're going into BFA, you have these level boost potions given to you. So make sure you use that class trial. That way you don't burn your potion on something that isn't what you end up enjoying. And get in there and enjoy Battle for Azeroth or whatever expansion you're seeing this video for. This game is so long lasting that even if the current patch were broken and disabled, a new player would still have a fair amount of content to consider getting into this game. It is massive. There's a lot of wonderful, wonderful, enjoyable memories to be made for somebody that's never experienced World of Warcraft. My name is Chris with Work To Game. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time.
Hey guys, it's me. Oh, well, if you don't know me, my name's Terry. I'm a beautiful Tyrannosaurus from Texas, and it just doesn't get more country than that. I tell you what, I grew up in these parts, I was resurrected by a ghost, and that ghost told me that I needed to come out and hang out on Work To Game's YouTube channel to tell everybody they should totally hit that thumbs up. Thumbs down make Terry hungry. It makes me hungry. You hear me? Hungry. Anyway, Terry, just keep it together. Keep it together, Terry. All right, guys. So, with that, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and hit subscribe if you haven't already to see more of me and my beautiful nose. Okay. All right. Good talking to you. I'll see you guys soon. I'll see you real soon. Terry, the Tyrannosaurus from Texas.